Welcome, fellow missionaries, to this tutorial on how to use your MPS funding guide. So first, welcome and thank you very much for taking the time to learn more about using the 9th edition of the Mission Project Service Funding Guide. If you are a new member, this tutorial will help you be more efficient and confident in the use of your time. If you're not yet a member, I hope just a little bit of information that we share with you today will persuade you to consider seriously the value of becoming a member in Mission Project Service. If you've been using the funding guide for years and are already an experienced grant writer, I would tell you to still take the time, these few minutes, to learn what we have in the 9th edition, because there is new information from previous editions. This includes information about online application, new sample grant research proposals, and detailed information about our grant writing workshops that MPS provides. Finally, if you are a member of your order or your congregation's leadership, I hope that even the small bit of information that I'm going to share with you today will convince you to formally designate somebody in your congregation to be that grant director who is responsible for making sure grant applications are submitted. Now, for today's tutorial, which will take about maybe 8 to 10 minutes, there are 3 things we want to accomplish. I've written them down for you. Number 1, I'm going to tell you that the pages you really absolutely should read in the 9th edition. Number 2, we're going to go through a sample research using the book to find the particular funders that might match a particular project. And then third, after you've done that, I'm going to share briefly with you how we choose and narrow it down as to which foundations or other funders that we should apply to. So let's begin. Must-read pages in this, the 9th edition. I would say that you absolutely have to read pages 11 to 42. There's specific information of value, but also just in reading these pages, you'll begin to think like a grant writer. You'll have a sense of the process. You'll have a sense of some of the language that different foundations and funders use. And finally, I believe that your state of mind will change. You'll become more confident. You'll go from being a beggar who's merely asking and hoping for money for your project to more of a teacher and an inviter. That fundamentally what you'll be trying to do is teach these foundations and funders of the opportunity for transformation that your project represents to them. And then you'll invite them to participate with you. Of note, I would say just a few things that you would look at would be page 11, and that talks about the detailed obligations of a grant director. I would look at page 15, and that's non-foundation donors. The book itself details nearly 400 particular foundations or other funders, but there are others that are discussed on page 15 that are probably in your area, perhaps in the city near you that they have representatives, that you can also try to develop relationships with. Pages 24 and 30, they have checklists. These are really easy to photocopy. Keep those near you during the grant research and grant writing process, and they'll remind you of what steps not to miss. And then finally, I would say pages 31 to 34. It's a very good sample proposal that you'll have. Now, the value of the sample proposal is many foundations will have a particular application form that you want to follow. The value of the sample proposal is it will help you organize your thoughts in presenting a particular project for funding, but it will also give you skills to present or imitate in creating a form that can be used for many of the non-foundation funders, individual donors, that when they see how organized and prepared you are in that, they will take you and your project more seriously as well. Okay, so let's go through number 2. Let's assume a sample research that we're going to do using this particular guide. Okay, now that each of you have read all of those pages that I said you absolutely must, let's move on and try to search for what funders that we might think would work or potentially work for a given project. And I've put together the following project. This is the Sisters of the Happy Heart. Now, I even came up with a little logo for the sisters themselves. I'm pretty sure there is no such congregation, but if there is, sisters, you have my apologies. Now, what are they applying for? They're applying for assistance for a leprosy residence and clinic that they have. What's known in leprosy treatment as a leprosarium. Where is this particular project located? It's located in Recife, Brazil, far eastern side of Brazil on the edge of the Atlantic Ocean. Now, what's their need? They really would prefer a grant of actual money to underwrite both their operations and the materials that they use. So they don't need professional expertise, for example, in terms of services of a doctor or a physician. They don't need training either. They prefer an actual grant that would help them procure the items that they already know they need. So let's begin the process of searching. What we call the graphical indexes of the funding guide begin on page 44. And what they do is they break down all project needs into one of two areas. Number one, socioeconomic, or two, pastoral and religious. Now, this particular project, while it may serve the religious goals and aspirations of the sisters, and maybe even does the same for the people that they serve, it's clearly a socioeconomic project. So if, for example, you went to page 44, what you would find then on the top left would be field of interest, and I'm going down, aid given, and the areas referring to parts of the world that it would serve. So this particular project, if you go down under field of interest, it would meet the health, water, and sanitation. This clearly qualifies as health. So you would then follow the graphical index across, and it would list below all the funders that serve health, water, sanitation. In this instance, are considered as really just health. And then what we want to go do is we go down further under aid given, because some funders will give personnel, some material, some information, funds. This is what the sisters want. They need funds. So we're looking for matches between health and in funds, and then finally in that area of the world. So Brazil qualifies under Latin America. So we see, for example, in this first group of funders, which is out of Australia, Latin America doesn't qualify at all. So you would continue to follow your graphical index across and find out those that match the other areas in terms of funds and in Latin America. So you can see we have several particular funders that are listed here. So you would keep going through the entire section that deals with socioeconomic projects. And actually, it's quite a number of pages. In this instance, it goes all the way from 44 to 64. So there's about 20 pages where you look and you go down the grid and to follow the match. Now, finally then, once you've found all those possibilities, and by the way, I will tell you, it is upfront, it is a meaningful deal of research that the particular individual needs to do. Because once you have found all of those potential funders, you will then go to the pages that are indicated for them in the graphical index, and you'll need to read up on that. And furthermore, as we indicate in the must-read pages, you absolutely need to, if you can, if you have the technology, to go to the websites for some of these funders and make sure what is the most current information that they provide. Because sometimes their deadlines change, their processes change, and sometimes they even cease to give in certain fashions. Some foundations have stopped giving, for example, to building projects. Others have stopped giving to just operational needs. So you really do need to spend that time. That's actually another reason why I strongly encourage funders to consider dedicating one person who will be able to make this commitment of time. Because once they've done that, and as you do it in the future, you really develop a working knowledge that will make you a mini consultant for your group of sisters or your priests or brothers, and then you can guide them in certain ways. But whatever commitment you make, it will be a little bit more upfront. Assuming that you've done that and you've done some of the research, you'll need to ask yourself, how can we limit this? So in the case, for example, of this particular project, you will probably come up with 20 or 30 different funders that could potentially support this. But you'll ask yourself, what are limiting factors? How might we break this down? I see at least two here. One of them would be the fact that it's not just medical, but it's specifically leprosy. And that's a fairly small and dedicated disease. Secondly, this is the Sisters of the Happy Heart that are applying. More specifically, this is an application which will be by sisters. So when I did my own review of this particular application, it ended up that two funders in particular jumped out at me. Number one was the J. Homer Butler Foundation. It's located somewhere around New York here in the United States. J. Homer Butler focuses on certain health problems, but with a specific priority for leprosy. And because leprosy is a disease that is not as prevalent as many other health problems around the world, that foundation probably has a relatively small number of people that are applying to it. And then secondly, this is a group of sisters. So I found another foundation, the Conrad Hilton Fund for Sisters, that funds healthcare, but specifically only funds projects that are initiated by sisters. So from that 20, I myself was able to reduce it to 2. And that's a process that the rest of you will have to go through. And with varying degrees of success, I understand. Now, this doesn't mean that you don't apply to the other 18 foundations, but it means that if you have to choose which where you think you have the greatest likelihood of success, I would have made those choices in those 2 instances. And as you move forward in your process, I would have to say that it is just as much art as it is science. So to review this tutorial, number 1, in using the 9th edition of the funding guide, number 1, there are must-read pages. Those would be pages 11 to 42. And then secondly, we actually did a sample search with the indication up front that be prepared to spend some time trying to learn more about this. And then thirdly, once we had developed that overall list, we then try to ask ourselves, are there any limiting or narrowing factors to your specific application? And then you apply those where you can. And that is basically it for right now. There will be other tutorials in the future, but in terms of how to use your funding guide, the 9th edition, we hope this has been helpful, and good luck in the days ahead for you. Thank you.